Welcome, everyone. So I imagine, sometimes I don't know exactly what everybody can see, but at the bottom of your screen, you should start to see attendees starting to stream into the room, as it were.
All right.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just for a moment. As attendees join us, we are thrilled to have the CEO of Y Combinator with us today. Rishi Modi will be taking the lead and introducing him and moderating with support from Swetha. This is Vicky, and I'd like to say it's nice to see you all. So I'd like to get our numbers up to around 200. We're at about 190, and then we'll start. So I know that everybody in the audience is from all over the place, all around the world. I'm in the Oakland Hills. Swetha, where are you?
I am in Berkeley.
Rishi, where are you?
Based in Chicago.
Chicago. Michael, where are you?
Downtown San Francisco.
There you go. All right. We're at about 2:05. I know we're going to start to increase more and more. I wanted to welcome everybody to our closing keynote for the A. Richard Newton Distinguished Innovator Lecture Series. A couple of weeks ago, as COVID started hitting our shores more and more, I think I wrote a note that one of the first 10 rules, I guess, of entrepreneurship is the need to pivot and take advantage of an opportunity, even if it's not a great opportunity. And I have to give everybody in the audience kudos. You all have been phenomenal about switching to the webinar format. The first webinar we had was with Dr. Renee Wirth when she talked to us about COVID-19 and what she's finding in terms of her research in population health. And we've had incredible speakers with us and questions from all of you. Those questions and speakers and coordination and working with you all would not be possible without two people, and that is Swetha Prabhakaran, who is in Washington, and also Rishi Modi. And so I actually wanted to see if it's possible for everybody to give them, I don't know, I guess you can't really give a hand, or maybe you can. If you go into your attendee, yes, you can raise your hand for them. I think just to say thank you very, very much. It's been a great semester and I appreciate your input. And for people who are out there, both Swetha and Rishi have been attendees in the past. And I think they decided that instead of just taking the class, which you can take multiple times, they would actually start to be coordinators. So thank you. Thank you everybody for raising your hand also. I'm going to lower your hands now. And I wanted to start with a quick poll. It is the last time we're going to be meeting. It's a pretty incredible time that we're living in right now and trying to support each other. And you all are going to be going off to whatever you're going to be doing this summer. And I wanted to pull up a quick poll to kind of get an idea on what is going on for you all this summer. I think the poll is the end of semester is upon us. And I'm curious, are you going to be graduating, trying to find a job, trying to do a startup? Do you have a paying job? And if you do, good on you. Just trying to stay sane and help out at home. Are you going to be working as a volunteer? Are you going to be traveling? Which was really a pain in the ass question. I was just kidding. Or are you going to be doing something else? Feel free to share on the chat if you're up for it. Guillermo, I guess you're in Sao Paulo. I like it. Oh, there you go. Paul Laverne already is trying to better you up, Michael. He's trying to get into YC.
Uh-oh. Has he applied? Let's see. We can look it up.
Paul Laverne, you're going to answer? Have you, oh,
Oh,
he said yes, he has an interview tomorrow.
Okay, good luck.
I love that. So I am just going to end that poll right now, and thank you. We've kind of taken about a minute, and I'm going to share those results so you can see. I think it's pretty amazing. 38% of you have a paying job. Congratulations. Another 29% are trying to find a job. And 18%, almost a fifth of our class will be graduating. Not to put any pressure on you, Michael, since there's no commencement speaker in person. You might be the closest thing to what these students have. So
I'll try my best.
With that, Rishi, I'm just going to hand it over to you and to Swetha. Thank you.
All right, well, that sounds great. As a quick, I guess, reminder just for everyone like attending, is that we actually have kind of the end of semester final reflections due on Friday, May 1st. So please get those in. It's kind of important just to pass the course, and really hope that everyone, just put some effort into it and just kind of take some time to like reflect on just your favorite speaker. It could be tonight, it could be any time, and just kind of you guys be able to share that. That'd be really helpful. And I guess on to today's speaker is Michael. So first off, thanks so much for attending. And I guess a little bit more background behind Michael was that he actually attended Yale, actually finished his degree back in 2005, and where he kind of majored in political science. And upon, I guess, graduating there, he actually went on to move to Silicon Valley and founded Justin TV, where he actually was CEO from 2007 to 2011. And for those of you not familiar with Justin.tv, hopefully you're familiar with Twitch, that really, big streaming platform that was acquired by Amazon. And upon leaving Justin.tv, Michael actually continued his entrepreneurial ambitions and founded Socialcam. So I guess you can see kind of a strong, entrepreneurial drive right here. And kind of with that, we'd love to just kind of hear more about where you involved in college. A lot of these really budding entrepreneurs here on campus. What kind of got you started, thinking about entrepreneurship, thinking about going and finding a company?
What got me thinking about doing a company? I originally thought I was going to be a lawyer. That's why I went to Yale. And I had this great woman who I worked for. Her name was Kitty Colbert, and she's a somewhat famous lawyer who argued a really important case in front of the Supreme Court. And I told her my plan to go to law school, but maybe I didn't want to become a lawyer. And she convinced me that even going to law school was a dumb idea. And so then I worked for a political campaign for a year because I really liked politics, and we lost. And the story of me joining Justin TV was actually, I was dragged into it. My two co-founders, Emmett and Justin, were starting the company, and they tricked me. Basically, we did a road trip across the country when the company was starting. And at the end of the road trip, they tried to convince me to join the company. Back then, it was an online reality TV show being live streamed. I told them, no, it's a horrible idea. Why would I waste my time doing that? Then I flew back home. And then 2 weeks later, they told me that they had also recruited Kyle Vogt, who now people know him because he's the co-founder of Cruise, self-driving car company. Back then, he was an MIT kid who was about to get put on the dean's list, but like the bad dean's list for kids who aren't getting good grades. And somehow they convinced me to break up with my girlfriend, leave my job, fly across the country, and join the company, which was crazy.
So
I
guess
guess 2006.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask you, because what was kind of your role right there in the early stages of the company? I mean, how did that kind of look like?
Yeah, so back then our titles were a little different because it was a show. So I was the producer. Justin's title was star. Emmett had some weird title. I forgot what it was. And I don't think, Kyle's title was hardware guy because he built the hardware. So we were very professional, as you can imagine. And in effect, I became CEO because we had to fundraise, and Justin was wearing a camera on his head. And so he couldn't go into investment meetings. And he basically had to be the entertainer. And so I had to start taking the meetings, and investors started asking, well, why are we talking to you? And so I had to become the CEO. Needless to say, I feel like when you hear about the founding of a company, it usually is a lot more pretty and kind of done up by PR people, but this is actually kind of often the real backstory, which is a bunch of young people who don't know anything doing something that looks stupid until it doesn't look stupid anymore.
Mm-hmm. So I guess along with that, I mean, there have to be some sort of challenges faced along the way. I mean, you're talking about, you know, eventually having a guy that gets a camera on his head to eventually becoming a company. So think about like scaling, how do you go across like the hiring, kind of growing from there, and what kind of challenges do you face along the way?
We faced all the challenges. Let's see. Well, first of all, we had to fundraise with this idea. If you can imagine walking into a VC's office and explain to them that you're building an online reality TV show, that was daunting. There were a number of times that we almost died, probably about 6 times we almost died along the way. One of the more interesting of those, what's that?
Explain what that means.
Almost died, ran out of money and had to fire everyone and go get another job.
Thank you.
One of the more interesting times was during the 2008 crisis, actually. We had raised some money and we had given it to our bank, and our bank had put it into something called auction rate securities. And then during 2008, auction rate securities got all locked up as the crisis began, and 3/4 of our money basically disappeared. And it took us a while to get it back. We almost died. We almost died a lot of times. We almost died because we were generating about $750,000 in monthly revenue, but we had expenses of about $1 million, and this was in 2010. And we went out to fundraise. No one wanted to give us money. We had about 2 months of money left, and we basically sat down and figured out how to get the company to break even. And it was interesting. We were very transparent with all the employees. We were probably about 30 at the time, and the whole company rallied to basically save the company. And we told everyone, if we end the year with $50,000 in profit, we will take the whole company to Hawaii to celebrate. And we ended the year with $1.2 million in profit. And we took the whole company to Hawaii, and it was great. It turns out it's not that hard to take a whole company to Hawaii. Yeah, there are many times we almost died along the way.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely great to hear. I'll just say, taking one step back actually for a second. So we have a question from Anna, and she just wants to know, I guess, how do you really know that law school wasn't for you? I mean, what kind of came you to that realization?
That's a great question. This gives me the opportunity to talk about something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. It turns out most people in college don't know anything, but they think they do. And it turns out that the number one source of information for folks in college are other folks in college. And this is a phenomenon that I lived as a college student, and then I experience now running YC pretty consistently. And so the reason why I wanted to go to law school was because I thought that's what smart kids did after going to college. And I thought that if I wanted to be involved in politics or government-y stuff, the thing I need to do was go to law school. Most importantly, what I didn't do when coming up with those thoughts was speak to anyone who was a working lawyer at all. But of course, you know, I talked to my friends, I saw what they were doing, so on and so forth. And the realization I had was based on talking to someone who was a working lawyer and asking them, what do they do every day? And hearing that they do a bunch of research and they write a bunch of briefs, and hearing that all the assumptions I had about the world of being a lawyer were actually completely wrong. Everything that I saw on television was completely wrong. And everything my parents knew about being a lawyer was completely wrong. And thank God I talked to someone who knew what the fuck they were talking about, because it became immediately clear that I shouldn't be a lawyer. One of the interesting things I find now is that you can imagine the three biggest categories of friends I had that graduated from school with me were lawyers, bankers, and doctors. These are the traditional professional worlds that everyone's supposed to belong to. The three biggest categories of friends that I have who dislike their work today are lawyers, bankers, and doctors. And the number one reason why is because they didn't end up asking anyone who worked in those jobs what was involved and whether they liked them. The number of doctors that I know that actually hate their jobs and who are in their mid-30s and have another 30 years of doctoring to do is like over 50%. Lawyers, it's probably over 80%. Finance is a lot more brutal, and most people wash out of finance within 5 years. So that's why. By the way, one fun note is that instead of going to law school at 23, I hired my first lawyer. And then I called my mom and I said, well, I'm not going to be a lawyer, but second best thing, a lawyer works for me. So does that count?
No, love the irony right there. I mean, definitely kind of just sounds like definitely take the time to explore, I guess, you know, especially as we're so young, different career options, and don't really kind of at least get experience just kind of learning, talking to people. In that sense, I mean, in your time over in college, was there anything that's remotely towards like entrepreneurship? Were there any programs? I mean, perhaps you're involved in outside of school, clubs wise, or I mean, I think you mentioned you're kind of interested in the government side of things, but maybe something along the lines of like tech or entrepreneurship at the time.
Yeah, no, Yale was different back then. Just to give you a sense, how many CS grads are at Berkeley are going to graduate this year?
We'll probably graduate about 3,000 majors between CS and EAPS.
How many?
3,000.
3. So at Yale, my year, 2005, I think we graduated 15 CS majors. All the entrepreneurship was dominated by like douchey business people. And so you didn't really want to be around that stuff at all. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that as a douchey business person, by the way. So, yeah.
And actually, kind of interesting question we have right here for like Akshat, actually. And you kind of think about career options, right, for students. So like, okay, maybe as a doctor, maybe as a lawyer. Kind of for you, actually, how do you know when you made it? Like, what does it mean to be successful, in your opinion?
Along the way of my career, I've met a number of people who enjoy their work and who actually have found a role or a job that they really want to do for a long time. And that's not based on other people's judgment. It's based on actually what they enjoy. And I think those people are successful. Anyone who can say, I would do this job for the next 10 years. Anyone who would say, I would do this job if they paid me half as much. I think those are the successful people, because those are the people who are basically finding the work that provides them the most fulfillment. And they're not defining that fulfillment based on how other people judge them, judge their jobs, so on and so forth. This took me a long time to come to this conclusion. I used to think that everyone who wasn't a founder was just lame. Like lame and not smart and generally like not motivated and kind of a waste of space, which is like a very easy to think as like a early 20s Yale graduate who thinks they know everything. And what I realized time and time again was that like, there's a set of people who extract a lot of joy from being a founder, but there's a much larger set of people who extract almost no joy from the experience. There's a set of people who get excited as things get harder and who like being in situations where you either have to succeed or die. And like, that's a very weird kind of person. I used to think that was objectively good. Now I just think it's objectively weird. I think that type of person really loves doing startups. But I've met people who, I mean, to be honest, are normal engineers at Google and who get home at 5 o'clock every day, love their life, love their family, love their work. And like, I think that they're winning far more than a lot of people out there who are tweeting and trying to make themselves look cool. And I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago. I would have shat on those people. So if you can get personal fulfillment, you're winning.
I'm wondering, Rishi, if you'd mind if I share some pictures and have Michael talk to those.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great, actually.
Okay, here we go.
Just make sure I can share them the right way. So right, oh, that should be you with your name spelled correctly.
Yep, that's me.
You know, I'm German, so I'm very picky about the SEI pronouncing that. So everybody, if you ever see EI together in Germany, that's pronounced not E, but I, so it's Seibel. So here's this great picture, very active. There you're sitting, not surprisingly, with a laptop.
Yep. Okay, let's set the scene. So this would have been spring 2007. This was an apartment, and at the time it was called the Y Scraper. So this building housed us, the Reddit founders, the Dropbox founders, Script founders, Zobni, Weebly, a number of other early stage YC companies. We were all between 21 and 25. You were not allowed to be running businesses out of this apartment building, but we didn't care. We were all running businesses. Rent for a 2-bedroom furnished apartment was $2,500. We had 4 people living in this apartment, or 5 at the time. I slept either on the balcony or on the futon in the background there by the television. That was actually a reasonable sized television back then. It doesn't look so tiny now. There are a couple of like little hints. So we are live. This is the first week or so of broadcasting. And we would get press to come in and shoot us live for the news while we were shooting them live online. So this woman is actually broadcasting for the evening news. In the background, you see that we've not very nicely drilled a whiteboard into the wall. You can also see in the top left, there's a banner on the wall. So one of our early monetization efforts, which we got a kick out of, was instead of selling banner ads on our website, we sold banner ads on our walls in our apartment. So people actually paid us to put shit on the wall, which was really fun. And one of the things that we started realizing as the show began, you can see that Justin's hat, if you look on the left-hand side of it, there's a little camera by his eye. So he's streaming live. And one of the things we really came to realize very quickly is if the camera's on Justin's head, you don't actually see Justin, you see all the rest of us. And we didn't really sign up to be part of the show. We were supposed to be in the background, but it turns out we were kind of on film 24/7. So this is the scene. This is the Y Scraper.
So I'm going to flip to the next one, I think, which is pretty much there's the story, 2007, 2014.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a nutshell, Justin TV started as a reality TV show, shifted into a platform where anyone could stream live video. And throughout a couple years of us doing this platform for anyone streaming live video, the most popular streams were actually sports that we didn't have the rights to. Soccer, basketball, so on and so forth. You might have seen the Super Bowl. One time we got shut down because the Olympics were going to happen, the Beijing Olympics, and NBC didn't want them to appear on our website. So a woman from the law office at NBC called us and said, this was a Friday. She said, on Monday, I'm going to go to court in San Francisco and get a judge's order to shut your whole website down for the next 20 days because the Olympics are going to go for 20 days and we don't want Olympics on your site. And we're NBC, so you're not going to really be able to fight this court order We just have more money. And this was like a Friday afternoon. And I was like, really? Okay. Is there anything that we can do so that you don't shut our website down for 20 days and cause us to die? And the woman said, no, this is just a courtesy call. Like, there's nothing you can do, which I loved. It's just want to let you know that your whole life's work is going to die. And we asked her, well, let's just imagine in the theoretical world, we could do anything. We were God. What could God do to make the website not go down on Monday? And she said, oh, well, if you built us a tool that allowed us to take down all the copywritten content that from the Olympics in real time, we might not shut your web down on Monday, but it'd be impossible for you to build that over the weekend. And we were like, oh no, I think we could do that pretty easily. And we did, and we didn't die that day. But what became more interesting was about 20% of our traffic consistently was people playing video games. And this was an experience that we had in college where everyone would come together to watch people playing video games. And it happened organically on the site, and we ignored it for years until one day we didn't. And we started talking to those people, and we started asking what they wanted. And needless to say, they had some very basic requests, and we started actually listening to them. And out of kind of this part of Justin TV, just the category of Justin TV that focused on video games, that became Twitch. And during the entire time of Justin TV, we'd been building software to make live streaming inexpensive. And we'd been building a chat system that could scale, the video system that could scale to hundreds of thousands of unique simultaneous viewers. And so when Twitch started to grow, we already had all the tech. And so it worked out really well.
Do you want to take some of the questions?
Yeah, I think that should be great. Or actually, I think it should be really interesting just to kind of think about, I mean, from, I guess, what kind of led you to leave Justin TV and then I guess eventually create your own company, like Socialcam? I'd love to kind of hear the transition right there.
So this would have been 2011. The company is now profitable. I think in 2011, we generated about 12 million in revenue, but we hadn't come up with the idea for Twitch or Socialcam yet. And we were just happy to be alive, basically. We were happy to not have to rely on venture capital to operate the company. And this guy came to visit us. It's this great guy. His name is Gideon Yu. Gideon Yu shows up in two funny places in tech. He was the CFO, I believe, either CFO, he had some executive role at YouTube and helped negotiate Google's acquisition of YouTube. And then he had an executive role at Facebook, and he actually helped negotiate Microsoft's, I think it was $250 million investment in Facebook at a multi-billion-dollar valuation. So needless to say, rich dude, smart. He was a VC at the time, and he took an interest in us, not because he wanted to invest in us, because he thought our business was horrible. But I guess because he thought we were nice. And he came by the office one day in 2011 after we were profitable, and he said to us, your company sucks in every way. In the next 3 years, it's going to fade away and die, and all the work you've been doing will be completely useless unless you change something. And this was the best thing that anyone had ever said to us. We were in the position to listen because we weren't sitting there like almost dead. We were profitable. And it reconfirmed everything that we knew in our heads already. The best advice actually almost always just reconfirms your greatest fear that's in the back of your head and forces you to deal with it. And so we said, okay, what should we work on instead of Justin TV? And we came up with two ideas. The first was live streaming video games, Twitch. And the second one was an app for sharing video with your family and friends, Socialcam. Excuse me. So we did what every startup is not supposed to do. We actually started working on three things at the same time. One part of the company kept Justin TV running because it was providing all the revenue. One part of the company started working on Twitch. That was led by Emmett Shear, who was our CTO, and Kevin Lin, who was our COO. And one part of the company started working on Socialcam, which was led by Justin Kahn and me. Now we have, what's interesting is there's now two stories. There's the PR story and there's the real story. The PR story was that both products were doing well. And so we decided to spin off Socialcam into its own company because it was doing well and it was built on a completely different tech stack, where Twitch was really just reskinning Justin TV. The real story is very different. Socialcam was doing horribly. And I was not a huge video game fan. I was not watching a lot of video game content on Justin TV. That was the product that was working. And Emmett was in love with video games. And so Emmett was basically leading the Twitch project. That was what was working. And that was his core passion. And so we kind of all sat down and we were like, Emmett should do this. And it was funny because I actually went to a huge video game conference to try to see if I could be inspired to really give a shit. And it was about 20,000 people down in Anaheim. I brought my brother, who was 16 at the time. And at the end of it, I was just like, I just do not want to do this. And so Emmett took over Twitch, which he was running at the time as heading that product. I spun out Socialcam. And Socialcam was a weird story. We basically figured out how to build great growth hacks, but we didn't figure out how to build a high retention product. And it's interesting because at the exact same time, Snapchat was starting. And we really had the same problem and two very different approaches to the problem. So we wanted to make creating video mainstream. Back then, people took a lot of photos, didn't take a lot of videos. We thought you could do it by making it easier to make pretty videos. So we built all these features to make nicer videos, kind of like Instagram built for photos. Snapchat, geniuses, they came up with the exact opposite. They basically thought, if by default your videos are so ugly that almost every video on the platform is going to be ugly, so you're never going to feel bad about submitting something ugly because everything else is ugly, and it automatically disappears, then all of the angst you have about not making a good video goes away. So we thought, oh, we'll solve the angst by making it easy to make a good video. They said, we'll solve the angst by making it impossible to make a good video. And they were right. So they're $1 billion company and we sold for 60 million. And so, yeah, they were on point.
That's actually a really interesting take. So I guess from there on, I mean, how did that, I guess, lead you over to YC? I mean, I guess, can you maybe talk me through that kind of sort of introduction, that sort of path?
Yeah, so I spent all of my 20s doing startups. And when Socialcam was bought, we were bought by a company named Autodesk. And I knew I didn't want to work at a big company. But I also knew that it was kind of time to get my life together. I was dating my girlfriend at the time for 4 or 5 years. And I always had a life plan. Actually, weirdly, I was a really bad college student and kind of a poor planner in the micro sense, but a really good macro planner. So my plan was 20s money, 30s family, 40s politics, and then retire as a teacher. That was kind of my plan. And after selling Socialcam, I guess I was 29, bam, I had money. And so I wanted to transition to family. And so I originally thought of YC as a great job because it wasn't doing a startup. I could spend time kind of getting married and having kids and kind of building my life. Back then, being a partner at YC was a part-time job, basically. It's like a 3-day-a-week job. Now it's fucking horrible. It's like an 80-hour-a-week job. It takes up my whole life, but they didn't pitch it that way back then. And so, yeah, that's why I transitioned. And needless to say, we were part of the early days of YC. So, I knew everyone, my co-founders were in the first batch. I was in I don't know, 2007, like the 4th one or something. And so, just organically, we would meet a lot of founders and try to help a lot of founders. And I knew I kind of liked helping and working with founders. I worked with the Airbnb founders early and helped them get into YC. So I kind of knew this was kind of work I liked. They originally asked me to come and do what was called then part-time partner. I enjoyed that work. And then they asked me to join as a full-time partner. And that would have been, I guess I was asked in 2014.
Right. And I guess kind of shifting gears, I mean, we'd love to, I guess, learn more about your experience right now, actually currently at YC. We actually have a lot of students' questions just kind of about that. What does YC look for in a company? Or I guess what is kind of like, for example, like Ariel, CS major, she actually asked, like, what's YC's point of view on certain industries, such as like travel, or like, how does like COVID, you know, something that's been so prevalent in the news lately, how does that, or like compared to the experience in 2008, 2009, right? So I guess maybe like, what's your perspective, or it's like YC's perspective on just kind of industries in general, and maybe in touching on COVID, for example?
Yeah, so I hate talking about industries. I hate talking about industries. This is what I'll say. When it comes to young founders, I will tell you the two biggest problems that we see. The first is a classic one, which is basically the problem of starting a company without technical co-founders. And I just feel like it's crazy to start a technology company without people who can write code, but that happens. The second one is more insidious. The second one is very weird. The second one is a technical team with no problems. So put another way, a team that's capable of building a product, that's smart enough to do it, smart enough to raise money, smart enough to talk to customers, and they literally have no problem they care about enough to work on. I would say this is the underreported virus amongst young founders today. And I really think the slew of products that came out from 2008 to 2015, primarily mobile products, really, really, really increased the kind of core lifestyle of most young people, right? Like you've got a phone that's got permanent access to the internet that you have all the time. You've got unlimited video, unlimited music, the ability to order food wherever you are and order a ride wherever you are. So like a huge chunk of core young person problems. Oh, and social networks, right? And chat apps, right? So like almost all of the young person problems that I had when I was in college, like don't exist anymore. Like, and there are a lot of young people who come from upper middle class backgrounds who didn't have problems growing up. And so just at the time where like studying CS got more popular, like young people problems got aggressively solved. This translates in what I call pivotitis. So basically it's a bunch of young people who are on VC Twitter trying to find ideas that they think VCs will like and fund, because that's kind of like the new gatekeeper. That's like the new cool people we have to impress. And have the expectation that if they work on one of these VC Twitter problems, a lot of users will come and it'll go great, but they don't really give a shit about the problem. They work on it for a little while, no users come, and then they know they have to pivot. They have to pivot, and they have to pivot, and they have to pivot. And each time they choose a problem that they don't care about, and each time they don't have the fortitude to stick with it. And, you know, then 3 or 4 years go by, and then they think, well, the next move is to become a VC. So they try to raise an angel fund. It's horrible. Like, don't do that. Like, it's horrible in every way. So that's the problem that I see. So like we talk about what industry, like you can do any industry you want. I don't give a shit. We funded every industry. Just give a shit about the problem you're solving. Like give enough of a shit that like, if it doesn't work, you just don't quit. And it's weird because like, I don't know the other way to inspire people not to quit. I don't want to sit here and say that we really gave a shit about doing an online reality TV show. We didn't, but we didn't quit. And the only hack that I've consistently seen for not quitting is giving a shit about what you're working on. I think we got lucky. And let's be clear, it didn't work well. until Emmett gave a shit about gamers. So like, that's probably the best advice I can give you. If you're trying to outsource the problem you work on to investors, you have to understand that investors are not cool and they don't know much. They're not your hero. Nobody who's good or serious thinks any of these investors are that special at all, even the famous ones. The heroes are the founders who actually build shit, not the people who write checks. And the founders often don't have enough time to spend on VC Twitter all day.
No, it definitely sounds like, kind of passion, just sticking through it, through like the ups and downs. It's a really long journey at the end of the day. And it really takes, I guess, a certain type of person to kind of get through all of that. So I guess I'd love to just kind of hear your thoughts on in terms of just personality traits of a founder. What are, I guess, the do's and do nots apart from that sort of passion? Because if you think about a relationship between a VC and an entrepreneur, it's like a marriage. It's a lasting, building relationship over time. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I don't believe that marriage bullshit.
Oh, really?
I'm married. It's not like a marriage. Like you'll see your VC like once a month. You see your wife a lot more than that, or your husband, hopefully. Okay, so I'll say this. There are a couple things. One, to have the perseverance, you can't care what people around you think. Everyone will think your idea sucks. If you care what people around you think, you will give up. Two, you can't be too smart. It takes a certain amount of ignorance to be successful. Because this goes back to kind of Star Wars, right? If you really understand the odds, you would never do this. If you really believe that the odds apply to you, you would never do this. I have this thing that I say that PG originally said when we kick off a batch. We basically say hey, out of this room of about 500 founders, about 200 companies, about 5 companies will be successful. Those are the odds. And we've been doing this for 15 years. The rest of you, yeah, you might make some money, but you actually won't accomplish the goal of the company. You will not make this company someone that serves millions of users, improves the world. And what's interesting is that all the successful founders, when they hear that, they think to themselves, oh, okay, yeah, I know it's hard, but that's definitely me. I'm one of those 5. They just believe it. And that requires being a little stupid, right? And that's important. I think that the last thing that gives you the perseverance is hating the alternatives. I hated the idea of working at a big company. I hated it so much. Actually, and I'll give you one more. As a young person, this was another really fun one. My startup was the only thing I'd ever done in my entire life. College doesn't count. College is irrelevant. The only thing I'd ever done in my entire life. Did I want an A or an F on my life? Startup failed. I get an F on the only thing I'd ever done in my life. And so every time I was like, oh, this sucks. It's well, sure. But do you want an F on your life? No, fuck that. Make it work. Make it work. Don't die. Don't die. And I got to tell you, we didn't look smart at the time. There are a lot of famous investors who did not give us money. There are a lot of people who told us that we were idiots, both to our face and behind our back. And they were wrong. So happy we didn't listen to them.
Right. And I guess kind of on the subject of venture funding, that whole sort of ecosystem, we should have a question from Sarah, and she's trying to, understand, when and if VC money should be avoided.
When should VC money be avoided? Okay, so there exists this problem today. I'm going to give some kind of a wider scope answer to this question. There's just a problem. The model for entrepreneurship used to be small business. It used to be a restaurant. It used to be a little shop on Main Street. It used to be a barber shop, a nail salon. The model used to be you go to the local bank, you get a loan, you make a business. And your goal for making a business isn't to become a millionaire, it's to provide a salary enough so that you can afford a house, a family, so on and so forth. In the last 15 years, startups have gotten so popular that they've almost are shining brighter than small business. Even though small business is actually what runs America. It's all of those coffee shops and gas stations and all of those small businesses and maid shops and all of them combined is really what moves our economy. It really is what employs the most people. But startups like Facebook started to outshine small business. And suddenly people started thinking that every business is a startup. Now, in the investment world, there was a pro and con to this. The pro was that everyone started coming to us. And so it kind of benefited VCs to perpetuate this myth because it kind of increased the amount of deal flow. It was really disappointing to founders, though, because they got no's when they were pitching businesses that were not VC backable at all. And it turns out that if we look at the world of small businesses you can create, there's a tiny, tiny subset of them that are potentially VC backable. Most of them are just leveraging software. And so the reason why you don't raise venture capital is because you are not building a venture backable business. And the definition of a venture backable business is a business that can grow extremely quickly, become extremely profitable, and generate massive returns for the early stage investors over the course of 10 years. And most businesses are not like that. Most businesses are not like that at all. And so if you, and by the way, I think there's some kind of weird moral attachment to that. You're not better if you are trying to create that kind of business. And you're not worse if you're not. There's no like good or bad here. Do the thing that makes you most fulfilled. But you are an idiot if you try to make a small business that's not venture backable and you try to raise money for it from a VC. You're just wasting your time. And what most people don't realize is that a VC's job is to take meetings. That's their job. It's what they spend. If you were to find a person's job is what they spend the most time doing, a VC spends the most time in their life talking to companies they're not going to fund. So it's their job to take meetings. So many people take a VC taking a meeting as a signal that they're doing well. I would argue that a good VC is going to meet between 500 and 1,000 teams a year and write 2 checks. So it was funny. This happened at YC. It was actually really funny. Sequoia Capital is like hilarious as a VC fund because it's a fund that people in the startup world know. But if you're not in the startup world, you'd have no reason to ever know what it was or why it was cool at all. But everyone in YC knows Sequoia Capital, and they know, of course, that they're supposed to raise money from Sequoia Capital. And Sequoia uses this relentlessly. So one batch about a year ago, Sequoia hired an MBA from Stanford who knew nothing, literally nothing, like absolutely nothing. And this person emailed all of the YC companies that they could, and the email came from the Sequoia email address. So every YC company who got this email would forward it to us, and they would say, oh, we got this email from Sequoia. Does that mean they want to invest in us? Like we need to make a deck. We like throw away all the plans. We have to like get money from Sequoia. And they didn't tell anyone else in the batch because they thought this was some big secret. And so after getting 100 of these emails in a week, we had a dinner, and in front of everyone, I said, hey, raise your hand if you got a secret email that they told you not to forward from Sequoia. 75% of the people raised their hands. In that moment, they realized that they were the sucker. Getting an email from a VC means jack shit, and that they should spend their time getting back to work instead of talking to some Stanford MBA with the Sequoia email address. So super long way of answering that question, but there you go.
Rishi, you with us?
yeah, I guess I apologize, I lost connection for a second. But I guess maybe taking it from there, just kind of the whole like thoughts of different business models and the venture ecosystem, where I guess we're definitely talking a lot about these companies like Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, these very fast-paced growing companies. And we actually had this one question actually from Aditya, actually, who was talking more about what's the future of the IPO market. I mean, what are your thoughts on like kind of growth versus profitability in that sort of regard for these sort of companies, going forward?
I honestly, I don't care. Startups are binary. Like it's kind of like, the best analogy I have for startups is professional sports. A lot of people want to play in the NBA and very few do. And even fewer become an NBA All-Star. I would kind of consider IPOing as equivalent to being an NBA All-Star. Now, I can't tell you how much money you'll make if you're an NBA All-Star. I can tell you you're just going to be fine with money. Consider that a success. And so ideal in the early stage world. And if a company can even talk to me about IPO, binary outcome, they won. And like, to me, the difference between whether it trades 20% down or 20% up on IPO, I could give two shits. Like, I really couldn't care. And honestly, I would advise you not to care either. Like, everyone dies before that. So that's not what I'd focus on.
Right. And so I guess maybe looking more, just kind of thinking about students and maybe taking it back, from like talking about like IPO, M&A, these sort of exits. Let's maybe look more into, I guess, the student perspective, starting at the beginning. And maybe, do you have any recommendations for students who are trying to position themselves, I guess, in just terms of like finding an idea or just trying to, like, where to even start? There's so many different options, so many different resources, but kind of for students, like, what do I even do, right?
Okay, so you have to start with some maxims. The first maxim is that the idea won't sound cool. You won't have an epiphany. There is no eureka. Like that's television. That's not real. The second is that there's this turn of phrase, you want to skate to where the puck is going, not where it is now. And so in the same way, you are trying to kind of create a change in the world that most people won't really get and won't really experience until 7 to 10 years from now. So it's okay if the people around you don't understand or agree. Now, I don't mean your customers, just the people around you, your peers, because most likely they have no concept of what this part of the world is going to be like in 7 to 10 years. The third thing is that, like, whatever is cool now, most likely the successful company in that space started when it wasn't cool. So we funded Coinbase in 2014, I think, when Coinbase gave away 1 free Bitcoin if you would just make an account. And very few people took them up on it. It turns out that was the time to be in crypto. Yet I kind of see the hordes of like young people thought crypto was cool when Bitcoin got to 20,000. It's like, well, it was a lot cooler when Bitcoin was a lot cheaper. And so don't ride the wave that's cresting today. It's just a recipe for disaster. I'll give you another example, right? There are a lot of COVID startups and startups that are kind of changing what they're doing right now to respond to COVID. And what's so funny is that, like, the startups that I think are well positioned for COVID were lucky because they did something 2 years ago and 1 year ago and like it wasn't working. And then bam, COVID changed things and now it's working. So like we have a company that's like a house party style company. It wasn't working. Now it's working. We've got companies that are doing telemedicine. It was really hard to sell. Now it's really easy to sell. But like they were doing it when it wasn't cool. Because they kind of knew this, they knew something would happen to make it cool, or at least they thought they knew something would happen. And then something did happen. A lot of times people talk about solving personal problems. I think it's the easiest hack to make sure that you're solving a real problem. Oftentimes founders want to pitch me on the ideas, and I hate hearing ideas. I don't want to hear ideas. Ideas are kind of more useful when you're talking to a customer. But for me, what I want to hear is the problem that you're solving. And all too often, there's like a just core badness around the problem you're solving. Either you have no experience with it, you never met anyone who had the problem, you're trying to apply some solution you came up with to a problem that you don't understand. And it just gets more and more frustrated talking to those people because they actually don't even really care about what they're making. They actually care more about having a successful startup than about the problem they're solving. That was easier to do 10 and 15 years ago. That's harder to do today. So give a shit about the problem. And usually that means that it's a problem that you've experienced or one that your family or that your friends have experienced. And it's an acute problem. We have some ideas that we call tar pit ideas. And generally they come from college students and Google engineers. They're the two biggest sources of tar pit ideas. And a tar pit idea is an idea that's attractive to everyone. Like a tar pit, it was attractive, I don't know why, dinosaurs, but that you like get stuck in and then you die, like a tar pit. And the two biggest tar pit ideas are a app for figuring out what to do tonight, like the Going Out app. There are variations of it, Yelp 2.0, a WhatsApp 2.0 that's for what's going on Friday night. And that's kind of typically the college tar pit idea. The Google tar pit idea that I love greatly is the Yelp 2.0 that tells you the restaurant that's close to you that has the exact food that you want, but that somehow you've never heard of before, even though you live in Mountain View and it's a fucking tiny place. and also you're rich, you don't have any life problems, and you're sick of the free food you get at Google. Like, those are basically ideas where it turns out that you don't have any problems, and like that problem just isn't that big of a deal in your life. So this is more a situation where if you like avoid badness, you have a lot easier chance of kind of coming up with something good. And the simple, hilariously simple answer is like, what pisses you off about the world? What have you experienced that pisses you off about the world? Go fix it.
Right. And what do you guys, I mean, kind of with that, I mean, currently for students, what are your guys' takes on starting a company right now? I mean, as a student, or are you still advancing classes? I mean, there are a lot of these programs out there, right, with like first round capital, dorm room fund. Is it worth it for the experience?
Generally, no. There's some exceptions, but generally, God, I feel like I'm going to give old people advice now. Here's my old people advice. College is like somewhat special and never happens again. Like ever. It never, ever, ever happens again. I'd enjoy it. I'd make friends. Like I'd learn some skills. I didn't learn any skills as a poli-sci major, but if you're a CS major, maybe you learn some important skills. But I wouldn't be too fast to get away from it because there are very few things in life that like you really don't do ever again. And college is one of them. And I think that it's really easy to be too cool for school. Like, oh, fuck this college. Like I want to raise money. I want to be a grown up. And it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't like people who want to be too cool for school. Like enjoy the here and now for a second, especially when it comes to college. It's like, it ain't coming back. And the other thing I'll say is that it's often the best place to meet your future co-founders. One of the experiences, Yale's kind of organized a little differently, but a lot of the Berkeley students I talk to, Berkeley doesn't seem very good at helping students generate a lot of friendships, to be completely honest. I think that's to do with how housing works generally. At Yale, you're kind of put in the same dorm with a small group of people that you kind of hang out with for 4 years. I think at Berkeley, you get freshman housing and then they put a gun to your head and say, get the fuck away. And so it's a different model. And I actually wish my best advice kind of specific to Berkeley students was like, spend more time making friends. Like, don't be too cool for cool, make friends, because if you're going to do a startup one day, it's probably going to be your college friends you do it with.
Rishi, I'm going to intervene for a second. We're at 7:42. We have a good 15 minutes. There are a bunch of questions that we have in the Q&A.
Right.
Had some other questions. How do you want to move forward?
I think it'd be great. I'm kind of just picking through the Q&A, just seeing, I guess, what kind of ties into our previous conversation right there, if that kind of works best.
Great.
Yeah, I actually did notice this one question from Dishen that actually is kind of interesting right there, which is, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs without technical background, kind of think about liberal arts majors? How can you exactly apply that to this whole landscape?
I love this question because I am you. And okay, this is going to be weird. I'll say it this way. You are the commodity, and the technical person is the person who's special. And I really think adopting that mindset is ridiculously important, because execution in the end is going to be how you win. And even if you're the one coming up with the idea, maybe you are, maybe you're not, execution's how you win. And if you're not writing code, you're not executing in the most important way for a startup to execute, which is creating the software. So you kind of have to take yourself down a notch. That's my best advice. And like, what's weird is that all of us humanities majors, especially, douchey Yale grads, we're kind of taught that we're the smartest people in the room. We can talk, we can sound confident, like people think we're older than our years, all this bullshit. And turns out that like, we don't really have real skills. I define real skills as skills that actually take a really long time to master. We don't have those. And so we're more commodity, and people who started writing code at 13, so by the time that they're 22, they already have their 10,000 hours in. Those people are the unique folks, and Berkeley's got a fuck ton of them. Also, there are people who didn't start writing code until they got to Berkeley, and then Berkeley worked the shit out of them, and so they got their hours that way. Either way, you need to make friends with those people. The reason why I'm here today was that I was drinking buddies with Justin Kahn. Justin Kahn writes code. He was elementary school friends with Emmett Shear. Emmett Shear is one of the best software engineers I've ever met. That's why I'm here. Like, it wasn't some genius businessy bullshit. It wasn't my poli-sci degree. Fuck that. No, it wasn't. And it was actually funny. I'll even put a more like, I'll try to like bias this even more crazily. I'm mentoring this young student who's graduating from Cornell CS. And he basically mentioned that he took algorithms his junior year. And that one class was 40 hours of work a week to get a good grade. That one class. I informed him that for that one class, he did more work than it took me to complete my Yale major. By a lot. That one class. And I think if more business people had that mindset, that like for a great software startup, software goes first, they'd be a lot better off. And so I'll tell you the other story. my wife went to Berkeley Haas. I generally hate MBAs, but then my wife became an MBA. So, you know, I just slightly hate MBAs now. And she had this great friend at Haas who wanted to start a business, but had done finance her whole life and didn't know any software engineers. Spent 2 years at Berkeley and, you know, drank and went to parties and didn't meet any software engineers. And I was talking to her and she said to me, those kids were never the cool kids. Those were never the people that like I thought would be helpful in my career. I was like a networker type in school, but I never networked with them. And I was like, well, you fucked up. And like, that was your best shot. Cause like most of the time you don't get to interact with software engineers outside of college, unless you're working at a early stage software company. Most later stage software companies do a good job of separating out the business people from the software people. So the number one thing you can do if you are like me and have a lesser degree is make friends with people who write code. And actually make friends. Don't fake make friends, really make friends. Don't just email people who write code and say, hey, can you build my thing for me? Because like, you know, you're just a pair of hands who can write codes and I'm the ideas guy. Nobody likes ideas guys. They're a dime a dozen.
Right. And I see actually Lillian has a kind of a pretty interesting question right here, which is sometimes she finds it hard to grasp onto an idea of making money while doing good or making something meaningful. Have you ever, I guess, exactly encountered this? If so, what are your thoughts? Did you ever have like
Yes.
a mentor, or just did you learn to be an entrepreneur at the end of the day?
Well, two separate questions. This is an
Right.
amazing question. There is this thesis going around that's kind of perpetuated in the media that companies are bad and nonprofits are good. And if you want to do like, you know, if you'd like to make the world a worse place, or if you're a greedy asshole, you should start a company. And if you want to make the world a better place, you should do a nonprofit, because that's what the nonprofits do. This is wrong in kind of like all the ways. Nonprofits are both good and evil. For-profits can be both good and evil. The problem with nonprofits is that it is really, really hard for them to get large and sustainable. And there's a core fucked up reason why. It's because nonprofits don't charge their users. It turns out that the number one way a business can tell whether it's helping its users or hurting its users is charging them money. It turns out that a nonprofit, by giving away a product for free, ends up serving the funder of the nonprofit as opposed to the receiver of the thing that the nonprofit's making. So the user that you care about ends up being the rich douchebag, foundation, whatever the fuck, and not the poor person who you wanted to help in the first place. Most nonprofits pivot towards spending all of their time fundraising. Their products are actually very bad. There's also this myth that poor people don't have money. I didn't grow up too rich. I can tell you that poor people have money. And in fact, poor people have to be even more careful about how you spend it, how they spend their money. There's this great story I heard when I visited Lagos in Nigeria. It turns out that if you live in a village in Lagos, you, in effect, make about $10 a month. That's your kind of that's your income, and about $1 a month is disposable income. And I heard this great story that for the longest time, Coca-Cola would be the thing that people bought with their disposable income. And literally, you might get one Coca-Cola a month. It would cost $1. And that was your like treat. That was your movies. You're going out to dinner. That was equivalent. Then cell phones came out. Everyone switched from that incremental dollar going from Coca-Cola to that incremental dollar going to cell phone minutes, because people wanted to talk to their loved ones and family. And Coca-Cola, when cell phones first got to the village, took a huge hit. And think about that, right? Like Coca-Cola had been selling Coke to these villages for like 30 years. But suddenly another product that is more deserving of that dollar comes out, bam, people move with their wallets. So it's extremely awesome if you want to make the world a better place. It's not antithetical to that to charge people for what you're doing. And it's not evil to charge people for a product that makes their life better. In fact, it's probably one of the best ways of making sure that you're actually making their life better. I'll leave you with this thought. Uber is a company that's shat on a lot. And I would say Uber culturally had a lot of issues, especially internally. But let's not forget, there are millions of people around the world, probably at this point, over 10 million people who Uber helped them put dinner on the table for their family. That should not be discounted. Now, could Uber be more ethical to its workers? Yes, and it should be. And I actually bet they get disrupted by a company that's more ethical to its workers. Their attrition rate's horrible. There are lots of things that they do poorly. But let's not forget in the end of the day that, like, if you know how to drive and you had a car and a smartphone and you, for whatever reason, needed work, like Uber could get you a paycheck. And so it's too easy for us to kind of live in our ivy, towers and shit on companies that are employing people. And it's easy to forget that, like, in the end of the day, people are willing to pay for things that help them, and people need jobs to put food on the table. So don't get too fancy with your morality and kind of miss helping people. It's like easiest thing to miss.
Yeah, and I guess kind of on the thoughts of just, companies like that's pretty similar to Uber, or think about peer-to-peer networks. Alberto actually wanted to ask, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you've seen these sort of companies face, especially when trying to fulfill the supply side of their network?
I'll answer this really quickly. I think the core issue with the gig economy is that we're just in kind of V1 to V1.5. And the gig economy, it was a blessing that it was built during a capital available time, which the last 10 years was. There's a lot of capital available. It was also a curse because the core business models were not frugal. If you think about a company like Amazon, it operates on a very frugal basis because e-commerce is a very low margin business. And it came up during a time when money wasn't as available. I think that the next generation of gig economy companies are going to be coming up over the next 5 years, where money is going to be a lot less available than the last 5. And so I think structurally they'll be more efficient. Structurally, they won't be able to screw over their workers as hard because worker retention is going to be a lot more important. Structurally, they're going to have lower costs because they're not going to be able to raise as much money. And so I think that the V2 will be better than the V1. But that doesn't mean the V1's bad. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Alta Vista, but it was a really popular search engine before Google. It wasn't great, but it was popular. I don't think Alta Vista's bad because it wasn't great. And I don't know if Google would exist if Alta Vista didn't exist. So I think there are a lot of companies that will step on the shoulders of the gig economy companies of today, and 10 years from now, we'll have better models. And either those gig economy companies will adjust and improve, or they'll die.
And I feel like the whole idea behind this, like transitioning from 1.0 to 2.0, things are always changing. And as you kind of mentioned, timing is really important. So we have this one question from Austin, who's actually asking, how do you identify industries or anticipate problems that will be really relevant within the next 10 years and beyond?
I think this is what's tricky, is that I don't think most young people are in the position to do this well. Where most people do this is at a job. Like where most people are like it's interesting because like a lot of B2B startups are basically started by founders who were in their kind of mid to late 20s because they're solving problems that they had at work. And like, it was really obvious that no good solution existed, because otherwise they would have bought it and used it at their job. And they went and they looked and they didn't find anything. So they'd have to like build something themselves, or just use something shitty. And so like, work is actually this thing that's like throwing potential problems to you. College isn't as much. And so, and VC Twitter isn't at all, like zero. And so, you know, it's weird. There's one other place that you can do this that's just really, really hard, which is being in YC. Every batch, there's some companies that come in, don't end up doing the thing that they want to do and pivot. And a famous example of this is a company called Brex, which builds credit cards and bank accounts for startups. They came into YC with a VR idea, which was horrible. They pivoted in the batch, and one of the reasons why they pivoted was they saw that all the international kids couldn't get bank accounts. And so they were like, huh. And then they also saw that all of the domestic kids were opening up bank accounts at Silicon Valley Bank, and Silicon Valley Bank sucked in every way. And so there are some little worlds that you can get into, YC being one of them, where suddenly you have like a group of people who are working really, really hard, who you can kind of survey and talk to and maybe see what problems that they're having that you can help with. But the more reliable way, if you don't find problems in your own life or your family's life, is to go get a job and find problems there. I think trying to guess what's going to be hot 10 years from now. I'll give you this analogy. When I was in school, I was weird. Growing up, I was a history science kid, which is really weird. I don't know why. And when I became a poli-sci major, I took this class in the American presidency, and this professor basically predicted Bill Clinton's impeachment, and kind of created this like almost science-y model for classifying presidents. And then like, what are the things that happen when you're this type of president versus that type of president? And I was a young, stupid college kid, and I said, oh, well, we can just apply this model to every president. And so I should be able to predict who will win an election. I should be able to predict what an elected president will do. And what he told me was that like, you don't have enough data points. It's not a real science. Poli-sci isn't a real science. You can't run experiments. And so we kind of wrap it in this language of science, but it's not science at all. I think people are trying to wrap startups into this like language of science, and trying to like, and I'm probably guilty of this a little bit too, trying to kind of help people science out what can be the next Uber, and or study, $10 billion companies and try to like science out like how to come up with the 11th. And I would just argue that doesn't work that well. You probably don't have enough data points. When you're studying Uber, you don't actually know the backstory. You know the PR produced story. So you don't even have good data. And if you were to equate what you were doing to a normal scientific lab, you would never run that experiment. You'd be like, oh, the results will be irrelevant. I think this is why personal experience is far more important. You can't, like, you might not know that anyone else has a problem that you have, but you know that you have it. And if you build something that solves your own problem, you know whether it solved your problem or not. It's a far better North Star than trying to kind of, take like 5% Brian Chesky and 90% Elon Musk and somehow trying to imagineer what the future is going to be. By the way, this is something that like people have talked about a lot. It's almost that every skill that got you here won't help you if you want to be a founder. And this is something we talk about a lot to founders, right? Like typically the skill that got you to a great school like Berkeley is by putting yourself in a group of smart people and then kind of doing what they did. And that's the kind of thing that gets you to a place like Berkeley, a place like Yale. And it turns out that amongst those really smart kids in your high school, even if they all didn't go to Berkeley, they're probably got into good schools. amongst the really smart kids, smart in Berkeley, they probably got good jobs. It just turns out that like when you're in the startup world, you get all the talented people together, all the really smart, talented people, 95% of them are going to fail. And so it's so different than any experience you have, right? Where like the best people die every day. Once again, why I bring up sports, the best people are dying every day. And so you've got to be really, really careful that you're not averaging the insights of a bunch of people who are misguided and who are going to die. That's a nice depressing way to end it.
We're not going to quite end yet. Almost.
Okay.
Well, right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the time today, Michael. I mean, it's been really great. I mean, hearing from you. We do have one last question from student Eric, and it'd be great to hear, I guess, his thoughts. But I guess along with that, we'll actually be taking the time to also post the attendance code for everybody. And I guess can let Eric take the spot.
I'm going to try. Eric, I can't unmute you. I think you have to unmute yourself. Eric Cipriano. Eric does not seem to be there, Rishi. So do you want to close it out?
Yeah.
You missed your time to shine, Eric.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, just really thank you. I mean, can we at least get a round of applause for it?
All right.
Be like virtual or
Thank
something
you.
like that.
Virtual
Oh,
applause.
hands going up. I will say that
And
this is
so
the largest
if you actually
attendance.
still have a few more minutes, I think it'd be great just to hear more.
We can't hear you, Rishi.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, Michael, if you have a few more like minutes, I think we should still have quite a few questions from students, and I think it'd be great to, I guess, answer those.
I'm happy to do one more. Hit me.
One more. I actually noticed this one question I thought was actually really interesting, and it was basically, what company do you find to be the most interesting or most exciting in this YC batch?
I don't mean to be offensive, but we just started interviewing this current YC batch, so I don't even know yet. Why don't you try another one?
Let me see if there's anything that's really interesting right here. Taking a second.
I guess I'll throw something out. You've talked about it a little bit, Michael, but so we've got a bunch of maybe average age is 20. What do you wish you had known, or what would you tell your 20-year-old self? I hear also children's voices in the background, and you kind of are, in a way, a parent at YC in a strange way, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you leave us with something as we're going into kind of a bizarre summertime? It's been an interesting time in the world, much less in the VC world. What kind of words of wisdom would you have had for yourself if you were going through this as a 20-year-old, and what do you have for all of us in general?
So I'll give two that I think have been most useful to me. The first is one that actually I've talked to a lot of my friends who did startups about. And we all wish that we were braver during college. There are all these moments where you kind of want to do something, but you don't, or you're too nervous. You want to ask a question, you want to talk to someone, you want to do something, and your nervousness gets in the way and you kind of seek comfort. And I think we all wished we practiced doing the nervous thing in college because the consequences were so low. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this is something I've worked on more recently, I was not a classically good startup founder. I don't believe that I organized my life very well to be able to be very productive. And the way that I got around it was I basically wasn't productive at all, except for when I was doing my startup stuff. The rest of my life was just a shambles. I wasn't very healthy. I lost a lot of friendships from college because I was just too focused on the startup. And it was interesting because just this year, I started to really commit more of my time to try to develop a good set of habits that can make me more productive and more happy, and a really good set of small habits that are easy to accomplish, but that can basically over time really help me. And it's been the most useful thing I've ever done. There's this book called Atomic Habits, which is a horrible book, because it should be a blog post and then the author turns it into a book. And but there's a great summary of it that I'm going to try to paste in the chat. And I would encourage you all to read this book. The habits that you create when you're young can help you be productive as you grow older. And if you're going to have a really challenging job, you need to be as productive as possible. And I think the thing that this book taught me was that effective people are more productive, and they're not more productive because they like making their bed or they like doing the things that people don't like. They're more productive because they trick themselves into doing the things they don't like, and they get them done. And, you know, for me, it's a lot around health. Like, I'm trying to become more healthy and work out more and so on and so forth. And I fooled myself for the longest time thinking like some people just like to run and I'm not one of those people. And some people just like to go to the gym and I'm not one of those people. And this book kind of just flipped my mind into like, don't assume people like shit. You have to be able to trick yourself into doing the things you don't like that make you a more effective person. And this is kind of a guide to how to do it that I found really helpful. And I wish that I had developed some of these habits in my 20s because I'd be more effective now. So yeah, that's what I got for you.
That's a lot.
Wow.
Thank you both. Thank you, Rishi, for the questions. Thank you, class, for the questions. Thank you, Michael, for your time. And thank you for staying 10 minutes later. Time is precious, probably the most precious thing we all have right now. I know this is a little odd, but as we're leaving, anybody that you read that you get inspiration from, besides, I think I know a lot of students get inspiration from you.
Anyone that I read that I get inspiration from, you know, I'm reading this book on this book by Richard Feynman called "Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman," which is really fun. And then I read this book that was really depressing called Dreamland, which is about the history of the opioid crisis. And I read this last book that I really liked. It goes back to my poli-sci roots, by Rahm Emanuel, called The Nation City. And it kind of talked about how things are changing and there's this new urbanism where cities are going to be far more responsible for the changes in your life over the next 10 years, maybe even 100 years, than the federal government. And how like a lot of the change that you can create can actually happen locally. You don't have to rely on DC. And the book gave me a lot of hope because I don't really, you know, no matter where you are on the politics line, it doesn't seem like the federal government's very effective right now. And it was fun to read this book because I learned, well, it doesn't really matter. Just because the federal government isn't effective doesn't mean that we can't create change in the country. And so those are some books that I would read.
So if I'm remembering your macro timeline, pretty soon we're coming into politics and then you'll be teaching, right?
Oh, I changed it. Yeah. So after being out here, I hate politics. It's fucking horrible. And so I just skipped to becoming a teacher, which is kind of my job now at YC. So I'm basically retired at 37, which is awesome.
Well, good luck with the new batch. Thank you always for your interest. And good luck to whoever's interviewing with Y Combinator tomorrow.
Yep. All right. I'm going to make some YC acceptance calls now. Talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I will go ahead and share just one more time, just in case, the passcode so that everybody has it. Rishi, thank you. Swetha, I know that behind that S, you're there. I appreciate everybody's questions. It's hard to get to everybody's questions, and I think Rishi did